Morning, everyone. Big data, cognitive computing, artificial intelligence. Everybody is eagerly after these disruptive technologies. And why? Why are we after them? Information and data. There is an information arms race going on there. But I'm here this morning to tell you this. Information is a commodity. Information is ubiquitous. Everybody has access to it. The real arms race is about using information for innovation. Or to put it another way, it's about seeing what everyone else is seeing, yet thinking what no one has thought before. Thinking what no one has thought before. Because the information is accessible and ubiquitous and available to everyone who has a smartphone, as you saw before in the video, even children can get access to loads of information now. It's how we focus. It's how we attend to a problem. It's how we think different. And we're going to explore that a little bit more. But I think it's worth it to wind back a little bit the clock and just see kind of exactly where we came from. So you might remember this from your U.S. history classes, those who studied U.S. history. We moved from the agricultural age to the industrial age. And during those times, information was a bit at a deficit. There wasn't as much information, so we had to use more conceptual skills. It was about process and production expertise. And then in the 20th century, we moved into the age of information. And many people would argue, we're still there today. But I would argue we're not. We've moved on from the information age. The world we live in today is the age of attention. The attention age. What do I mean by that? It's about filtering, focusing, and conceptualizing. Filtering information because there is so much information produced by so many devices and by so many people that we have to become expert at filtering. And it's not just technology that filters. It's this tool up here that we have to fine tune. It's about focus, because if you try to solve any problem, just any problem, any old solution will do. If you focus on the wrong problem, it'll get you to the wrong solution. And it's about conceptualizing, design thinking skills to be able to conceive and think of the things we haven't thought before. We are in a completely different age that we live in today. We need to act and be different in life sciences and healthcare, and quite frankly, in any vertical that you work within. Now, you may be thinking that, well, this is unprecedented times. We've never been here before. We didn't have the internet 150 years ago. We didn't have to contend with all this information. But that's not exactly true. What I would like to do is share with you an example that goes back a bit in time, just to explore exactly what they faced and exactly what they did. So I'm going to wind the clock back even further. 1800s, 1830s to be more precise. The speed of information was constrained by us, by man, or beast, whatever we could use. There was no electricity, there wasn't electric communication, cars, vehicles at that time. We could only spread information as fast as we could travel. If you take a look at this chart, this is actually from the Pony Express. If you've heard of the Pony Express, they used horseback to deliver news by messenger, basically. And you can see it's a very labyrinthine, a big maze-like trip, and they had to stop at every single place. The takeaway from this is it could take weeks, months to correspond from one end of a spoke to another, which means that information did not keep up with thinking, whereas today thinking and conceptualizing are very much behind the information. And if you had to do transatlantic business across the pond to London or anywhere else in the world, and they did, it would seem almost virtually impossible for 1 month for a boat to cross the Atlantic and back. Brokers and traders who did business would have to wait and decide in the absence of information until this man came along. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Who is this guy? Yell it out if you think you know. Morse, yes. Congratulations. There is an iPhone coming to you from these guys back here. Maybe not. But well done. You studied in that class and you retained that information. Samuel Morse, interestingly enough, he was actually an artist. He was an artist who had come up with the concept of the telegraph. He was not the first person by no means, actually. There were 62 other patent filings that preceded him. I believe there are 62, but he was the first person to codify a language known as Morse code and the invention of a telegraph. And that disruptive technology, which had greater impact than IoT, cognitive computing, anything that we're going to talk about today, this had a transformative impact. Why did it have a transformative impact? This was the internet for the Victorian age. This allowed people to transact where they couldn't transact before. Instead of months, it could now take literally minutes to exchange information on commodities prices. News that was happening over in Asia could now come in a matter of hours right to the United States. The world got smaller. Information spread fast. And in fact, many people said this was the actual dawning of the information age. If you look up here, this was sort of like a homage to the effect of the telegraph. The effect was railroads all of a sudden blossomed. Oil, refining, energy, news, all of these industries began to jumpstart. It was an explosion, just kind of like what we're seeing today with information. It was an explosion of industries because of the widespread nature of information. Even some futurists were predicting that what was going to happen was because of the narrowing of people's territories, because information was now so easily spread, we would know more about one another and world peace would ensue. That didn't happen, unfortunately, but that was their prediction because of the spread of information. But on the flip side, in the trenches, people working with the information, merchants and businessmen were bitterly complaining. They felt they were shackled to their desks. They were working day and night without a break. Many merchants actually started to want to pull the plugs physically. They were going around pulling the plugs on telegraphs because they said, I can't keep up with the information. This is an interesting little snippet from the London Spectator. The London Spectator, they were quoted saying, the telegraph has produced an unceasing stream of communication. Men are compelled to think of all things at the same time with imperfect information and with too little an interval for reflection. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound vaguely familiar to the world we're in today? This was over 150 years old. What's interesting from that is it wasn't just the merchants that were observing this and the businessmen who were feeling flustered. It was actually an observation by this guy named George Baird, a medical doctor who first coined the term neurasthenia, or nervousness. It had never been documented before. And what he noticed in this manuscript from 1881 over a period of over a decade is that there was a strange phenomenon that was occurring specifically among business people. What he noticed was anxiety, fatigue, nausea, headache that happened often towards the end of the day. I don't know if you guys get that, but certainly a lot of people did back then. And he said that this is a direct cause of instantaneous information. He said, it's this type of communication. It's helping to overload circuits in the individual nervous systems. This is the first time really documented that people experience information overload. There was a real overload of information. And 100 years later, you might know Marshall McLuhan, a luminary in the field of communication. He said, one of the effects of living with electric information is that we live habitually in a state of information overload. We have so much information, so many bits and bytes that are coming our way, that it shuts down our ability to stop and reflect and to think. And that is, my friends, the secret ingredient to innovation. It is not more technology necessarily. It is not more data sets. It's not more disparate groups of information that we hadn't discovered before. It is the power to reflect and to think. The power to reflect.